Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John's been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this here podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives. Difference makers who really make a difference.
You know, there's a lot of things to remember about 2022, but for John and I, huge Phillies fans, the biggest thing that shines brightest out of 2022 is the fact that that team came from out of nowhere to get into the World Series and almost win it. And so that's one of the things that we remember from the past year most vividly. And as a matter of fact, there's some other people that remember it too. In fact, John has a story about one of those people and his tremendous feeling of loss as the Phillies went down in 6 games in the World Series.
I hate baseball, sobbed Kieran Go. Age 9. Kieran is the son of today's guest on the Musical Innertube, Kristen A. Graham, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Kristen usually covers the continuing dramas and traumas of the Philadelphia school system. But when the Philadelphia Phillies lost the World Series after a once-in-a-lifetime postseason, both she and her kids had to face the reality of being a fan. And most of the time, it's a real pain. It can break your heart. It can give you heartburn. It can really suck. Here to talk about what it means to be a true fan is the fabulous and talented Kristen Holmes. Welcome back to the Musical Innertube, Kristen.
Hello, hello.
Hey, you know, why did your son say he hated baseball? What was he sort of embodying for you?
So it was that he said he hated baseball because he was so invested. So from the time he was, from the time he could say words, he was sort of fascinated by baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan and, really invested in the Phillies. And, he takes a scorebook to baseball games. He's kind of an old school baseball fan. He really feels it. And this is the first time that the Phillies have been in the postseason in his lifetime. So, he would ask me all season, Mom, are the Phillies going to make the postseason? And I would say, well, who knows? They just have to be good enough to get in and then, they catch fire and darn it, that's exactly what they did. And so he saw that as a fan and as someone who, frankly watched them when they were pretty terrible and was so invested and really believed in the magic and kind of thought that they would win the World Series. And so he was just, he was devastated. He sobbed his little heart out.
And how did you feel about that whole thing?
I mean, as a fan, I was disappointed, but I kind of told myself early on, like, I really was not sure that the Phillies would even make it to the playoffs. And so it felt like this free joy, right? Like I wasn't expecting it, and then they were in the postseason and then they were really good in the postseason and then they made it to the World Series. And, I got to write these stories. So yeah, of course I was disappointed. I was, I would say heartbroken, but I felt like the Phillies didn't owe me anything. Like I knew that this was probably going to be the outcome or possibly going to be the outcome. So, I was a little better prepared for it, but he was kind of learning on the fly.
I mean, and that's a very level-headed response, I think, is to say, wow, this is all icing on the cake that, this goes way beyond what anybody supposed that this particular team would do this year. I mean, they did really catch fire and they beat teams that were favored in 3 separate playoffs before running into a team that was much better and sort of ripped off their face and made them eat it. But I'm sorry about that. But I'm wondering, Kristen, can you explain a habit of yours? That is, if anybody who follows you and sees you on Facebook or sees you on Instagram, every once in a while we get the little message, "Beloved Heroes." And when did you start posting that, and what does it mean?
So I have to go back into the archives and figure out when I started posting it. I don't remember, but Beloved Heroes harkens back to something I used to say when I was a kid. So I was a really weird kid, and I would not only watch Phillies games, but I would keep score on, like, not in a scorebook. Like I would take loose leaf paper and make a grid and keep score. And And so, was the kind of fan that Kieran is. And when the Phillies would win, I would run around the house screaming beloved heroes. And I really don't remember what made me start posting it. But I mean, I've been doing it for many seasons now on Facebook and on Twitter. When the Phillies win, I tweet beloved heroes. And it, has become such a habit and such a thing that when I miss a game, like if I fall asleep or whatever, or I'm, doing my day job covering the Philadelphia School Board, people will say, "Are you okay? Is everything?" They're like, people are really worried when I don't tweet beloved heroes. So, and I've said, all fans of the Phillies are deputized to tweet in my stead. But yeah, it's a thing, and it's so funny because when I met the new superintendent of Philadelphia, Tony Watlington, one of the first things he said to me was, "What does beloved heroes mean?" Because if you followed me for education, and all of a sudden you see random beloved heroes tweets, you're like, what is this woman doing? What is her thing? So it really just harkens back to me being like a very strange child running around the house screaming beloved heroes.
We all know, Kristen, what kind of atmosphere there was at Citizens Bank Park during the previous run of Phillies playoff teams from 2007 through 2011. Where it was packed every night. They could always count on a sold-out house. People were screaming for every game, and that kind of disappeared when the Phillies got more mundane. But that was back for this playoff run. And as a matter of fact, they just signed Trey Turner from the Dodgers as a free agent, and that was one of the things he mentioned is you could hear it even when you were watching television. It was coming through the television. You were there at the ballpark for a lot of these. What is the fan really the ninth or 10th man on the field there?
100%.
How does that help the players, do you think?
Absolutely. It's like, even during introductions, it's like the fans are just waiting and tickets are really expensive. One of my stories was about, how tickets are super expensive. And these are you have people who, don't think and just drop the money, but you have everyday working people who are making significant investments to be there because they feel that passionate. And it's palpable. And it's not just, on the big plays when Bryce Harper hits a home run. They were into it. They were really into it. And it was interesting because the Inquirer sent me to Houston as well to cover the games in Houston. And, I'd never been to a domed stadium and was expecting it to be louder just because, the dome was on the sound. I thought the sound was going to, just be louder. And it wasn't. Even when the Astros won, it was not as loud. And it's funny because I still am getting random, Houston fans tweeting at me saying I saw your coverage and, take that. It's nothing about the team, right? The Astros were clearly the better team, but the Phillies definitely have, a fan base that just energizes the team. And, it was, in fact, Kieran and I were talking about it this morning, how Trey Turner turned down more money to come to Philadelphia because you can't quantify that, what the advantage the fans give. Now, the fans need to show up in, April and, Bryce Harper's going to be out for a good part of the season. They need to,
That's right.
They need to bring it early on. And hopefully they do. I know, season ticket sales are up and things like that. But, as a fan who loved them when they were terrible, hope welcome all these bandwagon fans, but hope they stay around.
Yeah, I think we should explain to our listeners who are not followers of the Phillies, can't believe there are, but there probably are some, that, the Phillies have come close the last 3 or 4 years. They usually fail in the last week. They have actually systematically almost, it seems, broken our hearts. Because we're all Phillies fans on this particular broadcast. So they have done what most teams do, which is most teams break your heart. Most teams don't win. I mean, they don't get to the top. There's 30 baseball teams, 32 NFL teams, 30 NBA teams, 32 hockey teams. So if you're a fan of any of them, you've got a 1 in 30 chance, about, 0.30 chance of having them win. Right. So my question to you is, and this is the larger question of, what are fans doing? Why are they doing this? If they root for the same team every year and doesn't matter who the team is, they still has that very small chance of winning. Why do fans do this? Why do they put themselves through this?
I don't know. There's something to be said for just the experience of believing in something. I mean, years and years ago, I've covered education for a really long time, but years and years ago, I was sort of approached like, oh, what do you think about moving over to sports? Would you consider covering the Phillies? And, I considered it for a second, but then I thought, I want to stay a fan. Like, it is such a joy in my life. I have 2 young kids and a really busy job, and I have a full and sometimes complicated life. And for me, the Phillies are just pure joy, even when they're, frustrating me by, the bullpen blows a save, or, first pitch, Nick is swinging at the first pitch as he does every time.
First pitch, Nick. This is Nick Castellanos, who swung at the first pitch more than anybody in baseball last year.
Correct.
Just swung at the first pitch. Never thought about not doing it.
No, why would you not? Why would you?
Yeah, exactly.
Go by you.
And he went from like 35 homers to like 6.
And everybody everybody would shout at the pitcher really loud so that you could hear it in, hey, this guy swings at the first pitch, okay?
It's not like it's a secret. First pitch, Nick, every time. But there's just something about that, and it's unifying, right? I could go into any assignment, right, and have almost nothing in common with the person I'm writing about, but kind of bring up the Phillies, or I have a Phillies sticker on my laptop, and suddenly you have a bond with someone, right? It's just a beautiful thing, and I think the game is interesting and it's slow, probably too slow, but I don't know. There's just something magical about it, and it's like kind of a complicated joy for me. And yeah, I love being a fan. It's wonderful.
And that camaraderie obviously extends to the ballpark. John and I have been to a number of games, and you're sitting next to people that you've never met and will probably never see again if you just pick random seats, somewhere along the first baseline like we do. And suddenly you're involved in stories about the last time John and I went to a game was when Noah Syndergaard started pitching for the Phillies. He was a midseason pickup. And what was it? The ladies next to us, John, had been to a game outside of Philadelphia and had gotten autographs, I guess, from some of the players.
Yes, right. They were talking about it, and they were. It was a strange game in a lot of ways because Syndergaard is not the guy he used to be. We're talking, ladies and gentlemen, about a 100-mile-per-hour pitcher for the Mets who was injured and has had to learn how to pitch sort of this loop-de-doop, slow ball way. And this was his first game back. And Don will tell you, he wasn't fooling anybody. The Phils, I think they won 6-5, and thank God the rains came at the right time.
Right.
Got rained out. It got 6th inning, but the 5 full innings were in, so it was illegal.
It counted, yes, as So it was interesting, and I think Don and Kristen are talking about something. We're talking about something really interesting, which is that sense, whether it is fleeting or whether it's something real. We could talk about that of community, right? Of being part of something bigger and connecting with people. I didn't go to any of the playoff games, but I watched them all on television in whole or in part, and we had to turn the TV down. It was just deafening.
Wow.
Yes.
And you could tell that the TV crews had put up all sorts of filters, and Don and I can really, we know what this is like. Because of, the announcers would not have been able to be heard unless they did something about the noise. Just amazing stuff. And yet I felt even, 60 miles away from the ballpark, I felt engaged and part of something. And I understood what was going on. I suppose that is part of it, that sense of being part of a community, whether it's real or not. It's certainly a persuasive emotion for being a fan.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that is? I mean, it's something that you probably as a lifelong Phillies fan will know about, and that is you live and die on every game, on every season, but some of these people live and die at every pitch. They're totally involved in the game and how it's played. What sort of hole in their life do you think that the following of the Phillies or any athletic team fills?
Well, I mean, it I don't know, it's kind of mystical in a way, right? I feel like, I have no illusions. I know these players are wildly overpaid, and, we say beloved heroes. I've gotten into this debate with folks like, a hero is someone who rushes into a burning building to save someone. Absolutely, yes. I'm not saying that, these coddled athletes are, on par with someone who performs some, great act to save humanity. But, they are heroes in a way for the joy they bring. And, what does that fill? I mean, if I didn't have the Phillies, it's not like, my life wouldn't go on. I would find something else to do and something else to fill that hole. But it's there. And I obviously interviewed a ton of people about being a Phillies fan and the importance of going to the postseason. That was the crux of a lot of my stories during the postseason. And so many people mentioned family. Like for me, it is about, my dad, and it's about my cousins and my sister. And, I always get a kick when people talk to Kieran and say, oh, your dad must love baseball. You know a lot about baseball. My husband knows nothing about baseball. My husband did not grow up a fan. And so Kieran always says, well, no, it's my mom. And,
Right.
That's fun. It's wonderful. It's like, it is so much a unifying thing for my family, and it's not exclusionary, because my husband's not a fan. It doesn't mean, that he has no place in my family. It's just, like a thing that some of us do, and a community, and not to say, it is the be all and end all. Obviously there are things in life that are more important, but it's, a point of joy.
Yeah. My wife used to tell me, when we were following the Phillies and they were less than wonderful. At one point, my son, who also follows the Phillies, but he's since moved to Baltimore, so now he follows the Orioles. But in any case, when he was here and the Phillies would blow a game, we would just look at each other and say, "Oh, the Phillies suck." And my wife would say, "Now wait a minute, you're a fan. You can't say that they suck." And I said, "Yes, I can," because that's also part of being a fan, is being able to say, hey, these guys suck.
Yeah. And I kind of struggle with that, because at one point, so I have a 6-year-old too, and he has been like Kieran. I knew from very early on that he was going to be a baseball fan, and Julian has been more reluctant, like maybe because I've never pushed it on him, but if I'm watching a game, sometimes he'll say, I don't like baseball. And when he wants to make me very mad, he'll say he's a Mets fan. So that's like, you can be a lot of things, kid, but don't be a Mets fan.
Right.
But at one point, Julian said, oh, someone sucks. And it was like, I was torn between pride as a Phillies fan and then like horror as a mother that my 6-year-old would say something sucks. So it's like, well, honey, like you can say that you're upset with this play, but like, that's not the word we use. It's great. You don't want your first grader to say stuff. But yeah, it is. You do have that right to criticize them because, yeah, you've been there. And that's what I told Kieran when he said he hated baseball. Like, no, you actually love baseball. You are so invested in it that it makes you this upset. But like, think about everything that it's giving you. Think about, all the happy times you've had because of it. And also, P.S. John Middleton and his stupid money are going to go out and sign Trey Turner. So,
yeah,
hopefully, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, will be in the playoffs again.
Right. It's interesting. I think there is sort of a microclimate in different towns. You're talking about how we have the right to say that the team sucks or the team is bad or this guy I wish we didn't have him on the team. You hear this all the time. Now in Los Angeles, it's different. I don't think you hear people saying, the Dodgers suck very much, even when the Dodgers aren't doing well. It's just a sort of a different thing. And that just wasn't the culture.
Yeah. I mean, it's very it's a very Philly thing, right? Like we're super passionate in both directions, and that's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
And one of the things when I covered fan stories during the 2008 run, I interviewed Shane Victorino's parents, and they said they're so happy that he landed in Philadelphia because they're just like this legion of people who feel like Shane is part of their family. Like they're in Hawaii, the Victorinos are in Hawaii, and but they know their kid is always going to be. Obviously he's a grown man with a family of his own, but they just felt like there was something special about Philadelphia, the way we are so passionate, in good ways and bad.
And it causes me to think about somebody like Gene Segura, who is not on the team now. Maybe he's a free agent and nobody's claimed him yet. The Phillies may take him back, but probably not. They just signed Trey Turner, so they've rearranged their infield. He was the second baseman, and now he's not there. But he worked all his life to get on a playoff team, 11 years, I think. And he finally got on a playoff team, and he finally got to the World Series. And he gets to the World Series, and he doesn't win it, but he's on a World Series team. And then business reasons, they say, okay, we're not going to renew your contract. That must hurt. Especially when you now probably will go to another team in another city that doesn't have the kind of frenzy that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I imagine that's a much different feel. And like, obviously there's some players who thrive in it, like Shane Victorino, like he ate it up, and some people. Alec Bohm, and I hate this city.
Yeah, Alec Bohm, who is our third baseman, ladies and gentlemen, and he couldn't field a ground ball if it was presented to him on top of a birthday cake that was riding the back of a very slow tortoise. I mean, and I'm only exaggerating a slight bit. He's got a fielding thing, and even when he gets the ball, he throws it funny. But at the beginning of the season, I need to back up and explain. He was caught. He made 3 errors, right? In whole
one game.
In one game, and the entire stadium was filled with Philly fans, and they were going, "Boo, you're the worst!" Boo. He was really getting it, and you could see him talking to the third base coach or somebody saying, "I effing hate this place." And so they interviewed him after they beat Atlanta at the other end of the team, and the first thing he said is, "I love this place."
But I have to say, he played it exactly right. He owned it, and that's why he will be, yes, he's Butterfingers, and his fielding is, a problem, but he owned it. He said, yes, I hate this. And, we've all had those moments when we say the wrong thing, but he, came out and owned it and showed himself to be the kind of guy that Philadelphians want, in the clubhouse for sure.
That's something that is commented upon a lot, and that is that in Philly, to be a hero, a beloved hero, on any sports team, all you need to do is be a blue-collar worker. A person that shows up every day and knows what the job is and goes about it in a very workmanlike fashion, and takes the ups and downs and isn't a prima donna and that sort of thing. Certainly Bryce Harper, whom they signed for a gajillion dollars a few years ago, has shown that. He's really enthusiastic about being in Philadelphia and being a Philadelphian and going to work every day, even though his arm was killing him. So that's something that plays into it too, is that the people who talk about Philly crowds also talk about how those Philly crowds appreciate somebody who seemingly, even though he's making billions of dollars, is just like them.
Yep, absolutely. It's a big part of it. Like, we could see you, around the dinner table.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm a little surprised, 3 or 4 years into the Bryce Harper experiment, just how Philly he wants to be. My experience of him when he was playing for the Washington Nationals was that he was full of himself and hateable. And although I can't say I still think he's not full of himself, I also think he's really working hard to be with us. He's really trying to be here and be part of things. It's astounding how human he's become.
Well, I mean, if I were Bryce Harper, I would be full of myself too. Like, he's a really good baseball player, but it's also, think about where he comes from, right? So he was a phenom. They were writing stories about him when he was 13 years old. So if you came up as the anointed one, even if you came from, a family that tried to keep you humble, it's going to be hard to not feel like the anointed one. So I think his heart is in the right place, and yeah, he's worked for it. He certainly has a bajillion dollars, but he's worked hard for it.
And really, he's been worth every dap of the ointment, right? I mean, I think we can say he's been worth the money, and especially getting the hit that put us into the World Series, which I don't think anyone's going to forget.
Never.
It made the top 5 MLB plays of the year, certainly, along with there were other things that the Phils had done during the year that ranked high, like Schwarber's 490 million mile home run against the Padres, which was quite astounding to watch. And Schwarber's has reached out, I think, to the audience in a very nice way. I mean, our superstars are really trying. We'll be right back to our show in just a moment, but first, this soothing musical interlude.
Kristen Graham is an award-winning reporter with a long and distinguished career with the Philadelphia Inquirer. For many years, she's been covering the Philadelphia school system, one of the largest and most deeply troubled urban school systems in the country. Kristen was a lead writer on Assault on Learning, a series that brought about large-scale changes in that system and won the 2012 Pulitzer Prize for Public Service.
Kristen is a Kiplinger Fellow in Public Affairs Journalism and has won multiple other local and national awards. She is also an expert and enthusiastic user of social media. Check out her work. That's Kristen Graham for the Philadelphia Inquirer online. And now back to the Musical Innertube.
Now, when you went to Houston and encountered that different vibe,
Yes.
the it's not the Astrodome anymore, it's Minute Maid Park, I guess. Mm-hmm. What sort of, you talked to some fans of the Astros who knew you were a Phillies fan. What kind of response did you get? They didn't seem to be quite as belligerent as at least in your reporting, as one would expect.
So they knew I was a Phillies fan because I had the bright idea to wear every item of Phillies gear I owned into the ballpark. Pitched that when my editors were like, "Oh, let's send you to Houston." So yes, I made it very clear, and I knew that it would be different than had I done the reverse experiment in Philadelphia, which I later did. They were so nice to me. It was almost a little like off-putting how nice they were to me. Like people were holding doors for me. People were, oh, good luck to your team. But this was
right.
This was the first game. This was when I think they underestimated the Phillies and they didn't think that we were going to win. And also in that first game, the Phillies were down by 5 runs. So when the Phillies scored their first run, they were like, "Oh, look, your team got a hit. Isn't that cute?" But really, I met incredibly nice people. You know, I wrote in one of my stories that like Houston kind of showed its Southern hospitality and Philly showed its Philly attitude. Because the reverse, I did eventually in, maybe the 9th inning, I got my first boo at Minute Maid Park. I was wearing a Phillies jersey and walked past folks. And also by the 9th inning, you've got people who are more drunk, right? Yes. So I think that behavior is more likely to come out. So after, the story came out, I wore my Phillies jersey to the Astros game. My editor said, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if you wore an Astros jersey to the Phillies game?" and had me buy Astros gear when I was in Houston, which really felt disgusting. Like, I know it's psychosomatic, but I put on the Astros jersey and I was itchy. It was like, what am I doing? So that was a different experience. And it was also interesting because my colleague Steve Falk, who was a photographer who was taking pictures of fans that night that I wore the Astros jersey at Citizens Bank Park, he was like, "Listen, Kristen, I don't want you out of my sight. People will do bad things, And so, I always had someone with me, which was, you hear about Philadelphia fans, booing Santa and throwing batteries on the field and whatever, we have a reputation. People were generally fine. Like, they gave me a hard time, "Why are you wearing that jersey?" But it wasn't until the end of the game that, someone first dropped the F-bomb on me, which I thought was interesting. And also I wore the Astros jersey at a game, the Phillies, it was like a blowout. The Phillies won it decisively. So it might have been different if the Astros were winning, but it was an interesting experiment.
Well, Kristen, you have given us a lot of interesting things to think about in the foregoing half hour. We've gone everywhere. We've talked about an amazing season for an unexpectedly good team. We've talked about why we still root when it really hurts a lot, and just a lot of the ins and outs of fandom in general. And we really thank you for coming on the Musical Innertube once again.
A pleasure. Go Phils.
Next year.
Take care. Yep. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Check out our website at musicalinnertube.com, where you'll find all our episodes, profiles of our guests, and lots of extras. You'll even be able to leave us a voicemail.
Our email address is musicalinnertube @gmail.com. On Twitter, our handle is MInnertube. Capitalize the M and I.
The Innertube is available on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.